Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. Hello, and welcome, everybody, to this next episode of the Revenue Rewired podcast. Hi, Jay.
How's it going, Sarah?
So good. Normally, you guys, we record these in the mornings, but because we do it in the afternoon today, we're feeling punchier. Maybe it's just me.
Oh, you're so funny. I'll
I
try to
know, I
behave
know.
then.
Oh boy, that'll be the day. All right. Well, today we want to talk about a couple of interesting things, and one of them being the straw that broke the customer's back. Now, roll with us because I think you'll be very intrigued and surprised by this topic. And uh, our company does a book club, and so we've maybe mentioned that on the show a couple times. Every quarter, we try to pick a book that is relevant. It at least captures an issue we're trying to solve or something we want to be better or more informed. And maybe one of these days we'll do a fun book, I guess. But actually, for the most part, the team really seems to enjoy a lot of the recommendations. So we've done stuff like, actually, Jay, what was your favorite book club book we've done so far?
Revenue Rewired.
Our own book. That's nice. That was a good answer. He
Uh,
was not prepared for that question, people.
that we've read
I
so many. Honestly, I think back to the when we first started this, and Traction was, I think, one of my favorite books we read. It was so fun.
well, actually, that was just you and me. That wasn't even company
Oh, it
wide.
was what is by EOS, I think it was. We made everyone read
Oh
and kind
yeah,
of talk
what the
through it.
heck is
Yeah.
EOS?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it depends on my mood, and right now I'm really enjoying our current book, which is The Effortless Experience. And some of you may have read that book and you're like, oh, I did read that book several years ago. Yes, it is slightly older, meaning 10 years ago or so. And I knew that when I picked this book. But one of the reasons why we specifically chose this book is, as we've shared, our agency has worked really, really hard to get into understanding AI and being confident and well spoken enough and educated in the space to be able to now offer it as services to our clients with outcomes. And we've successfully been able to do that this year. But fairly enough, a couple of our team members are like, hey, I'm concerned about losing the human experience. And I'm worried AI is going to kind of ruin that for a lot of people. And so it's been in the back of our minds. How are we walking this tightrope of digital experiences and having excellent customer experiences at the same time and making it feel special and not transactional? And if you're ever interested, I know a couple of peers that do book clubs. It's really wonderful to get your teams aligned. And so for the first quarter of this book, one of the biggest pieces of aha for Jay and for myself was the big P, little p. And Jay, I'm going to let you explain big P and little p in terms of how that spoke to you in being impactful in this book.
Well, I think the way he kind of told in the book and the story, it's interesting how, what companies believe the needs are to resolve a person's pain point, and what their preferences are, which ties into the letter P there. And often, you're trying to solve to a thing that you believe the preference is, but it's not always the true preference. Almost like going back to the whole like Simon Sinek with the whole the what's your why type of situation. And so I really enjoyed the book because it was all talking about, some very simple things. Like, for example, it's like if someone wants to buy a car, it's the whole big P versus little p. And so you think about it, it's like, oh, it's like, they need, a, I don't know, an electric car, and that might be what you're thinking the big P is, but the bottom P might be, or the little p, you go back and forth on, is it really tied to saving money? Or is it, about the environmental side? I think it's all about really understanding the consumer and you basically engaging with them in a way that's really going to address, their bigger preference and not what you think from a marketing point of view is the need of that consumer. But I just love that point of view because I just find that this is probably one of the hardest parts I think companies have is you have to kind of find a way to create a marketing or a sales strategy that engages on like a one-to-one level, which obviously is not very feasible when, especially in the digital world when you're kind of doing a one-to-many. So I think that's where I think a lot of companies have challenges, which is why I love the whole like, segmentation strategies where you actually can build out, custom approaches there. But that was my perspective. I'm curious, Sarah, like what were your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I recently had, I'll go with your car story because this ties perfectly into it, where I needed to service my car. So my big P preference was to have my car serviced. My little P preference was to make it really easy. I like doing things where I can schedule it online. And I did that. Now I'm going to veer just a bit where I scheduled it for the wrong dealership. Now, my little p preference is also that why don't all the dealerships have my information so that it doesn't matter what dealership I go to? Now, I understand I'm clearly not aware of how dealerships actually work, as you
Hmm.
filled me in. They're more like franchises, but I don't know that every consumer is maybe aware of that. I might be surprised that I'm a total idiot. So hopefully someone calls me out. But my little p preference is that all of my information gets transferred, just like if I were on a customer service phone call. You know, that's probably one of the biggest beefs is when someone has to repeat themselves. That's a little p preference, like how the transaction is happening, how you prefer to be contacted. If you'd prefer email over phone, you're pretty annoyed when someone keeps blowing up your phone. But your big P preference is how is this product, you know, in my mind, going to have this quality and this price and all of these things. And so there's this double-edged sword a little bit with preference. And that here's the bigger preference, which I think brands are pretty good at thinking about how does this affect my consumer, my customer, my client. But then there's the little p preference, which is all of the little things that get them to the end point. All of those add up, which is why we were calling it the straw that breaks the customer's back, and how many transactions can someone go through and how many clicks they have to go through to get those transactions. It's a pain in the butt. And as you mentioned, Jay, it's something a lot of customer or clients don't think about when dealing with their
Well,
customers.
yeah, I think on that note, again, I do recommend those that are, dealing with any kind of like, customer experiences. This is a really solid book. I often go into these being like, oh gosh, here we go again. I'm going to read the same thing over and over again. But it did have a couple really good stories in there. And for example, on your point there, Sarah, I started thinking about that as I've, have grown various different businesses and consulted for so many different clients. You almost have the idea about the whole like customer, intake process. And again, a lot of mindset might be is like choose your own adventure. Like let's give them every option possible. You give a phone, you give an email, you do chat bots and carrier pigeons, whatever else it is that you want to allow people and how they engage with you. But the book did a really good job in talking about, sometimes actually giving too many options actually makes it hard for people to make a decision. And potentially, if you offer up services that you can't properly scale, like email, for example, your response timing is way too slow. And so there's this element of, you can't give them everything under the sun, but you have to make it easy on people. And then obviously you can scale from there. So, again, I love that part of the book as well because, for companies that are trying to improve their customer experience, if they just listen to those that yell the most, that might actually not be what's best for their customer base, and or their business. Because if you start implementing things they don't have in place right now, you actually can make things worse. And that's where I think it's kind of interesting, when you start thinking about all of this stuff, is that it's just amazing to me is how few companies really take the time to take a step back and put themselves in the shoes of their ideal customer, instead of just focusing on those that yell the most.
And I would say we have said that statement a lot. Like it is a a drum that we beat incessantly for good reason. But here's where I'll take a little language spin on it. And I'll say, can you look in the shoes of your customer and say, are you even meeting expectations? And what's surprising, I think that was probably the most surprising thing I've gotten out of the book so far, is that delighting and going above and beyond and being exceptional in all these ways actually does not move the needle. It's meeting expectations consistently is what keeps loyal customers. And I really thought how that could blow up so many theories about, customer acquisition and retention is meeting expectations is literally the bare minimum, but it's also the most expected. And I loved the example of we were talking about this internally because obviously, what's a book club without meeting about it? And one of the team members mentioned at a former agency, they worked with a medical facility. And when they surveyed all of the people in this facility, they asked them, what were your bare minimum, like, what's your expectation of this facility and the services? And overwhelmingly, the response was, don't kill me.
That was a
We
horrible
were like,
story.
there's just no way. But honestly, I thought about it. So I told this story to someone recently, and they said, okay, so the same thing would apply, like the driver of the school bus that's taking your children to school. Your bare minimum is don't get in an accident with my child.
Yep.
It's amazing how you just kind of overlook, I think, expectation and maybe call it bare minimum. It sounds bad, but I don't know. Maybe you have a better word for it.
No,
Sometimes you're,
honest, actually I love that. Again, I'm drawing a blank on the exact name of the book, but when the whole Zappo story, um, I really
oh,
enjoyed reading
yeah.
about that. Their book because it is pretty impressive. But again, I think here it's like to your point, there are so many companies out there that try to follow the Zappos and the Southwest and Nordstroms and whatnot, and then they over try servicing the customer. And it's like, for example, if you get, your car and your preference here is just that my car comes back and I don't have to call you guys back again for till my next oil change in 6 months or whatever. But again, like these companies, like last time I serviced my car, I got, I don't know, I think 3 emails after that, following up and asking me for reviews. I'm like, okay, so I answered the review finally, and then all of a sudden I got a call from one of their salespeople saying they got my review in and they were curious if I'm interested in selling my car. It's like, okay, you think that you're right now getting great feedback from me and learning, but all you're doing is pissing me off. And I do, it actually ties into my funny story I think I shared with you the other week, and I mentioned this on a past show, is that we had to do a redo of our roof at home. And I can't believe it. We had one company, that sales guy was pretty solid, but I guess he was really busy that week on visiting homes to give, the estimates and whatnot. And I was heading out of town soon. I really wanted to make a decision on which company we wanted to go to. And so I chatted with him, at least on the phone. I followed back up and I'm like, what's the status? He's like, oh, I haven't had time to get over to your place for me to, do measurements and whatnot. So I still have to do that. But if you need a quote this week, the only way it's going to happen is if you get up on a ladder and take a video of the roof and whatnot and send me the details, and I'll use that plus, Google Maps or whatever to give you a proposal. And I'm like, okay, it was just raining outside. I recently broke my collarbone, so my wife is a little afraid of me, climbing up on ladders and scaling the roof. And it just really was not an ideal experience. And so, unfortunately, for those that have done a roof remodel, know that this is not a cheap investment. He lost that business because, in his mind, he was giving me an option to make it easier on me for me to get a proposal, but I've never shown interest in wanting to do that. And I think that's where I think the problem is. I think so many companies are moving so fast and thinking they're trying to give a solution to a customer to get their business, but they're making it not a good experience.
hmm it's, it- I think it's a little shocking when you understand what the bare minimum expectations of your clients are, because often when you get a new customer or client, you hear all of the basically dirty laundry stuff from the experience they had with a former, business. And it feels like a lot, like, oh, we don't do any of that stuff. When ultimately you could boil it down to like the root cause. And that's something we do a lot here where, root cause analysis. What was the actual underlying issue? And often I think there's a client of ours where the issue was really no one communicated, things weren't working with their old agency. And it was like, oh man, they just wanted to be part of the process. It
Hmm.
wasn't that things weren't working necessarily, but it was that we weren't involved in helping fix it. And just it's just surprising to me. And so, do you have any ideas based on like our book or this book about how someone can go about figuring out what might be the straw breaking the camel's back? And I'll lead you with a quick thought. Back in the day, I learned about extra clicks in marketing and
Hmm.
how this is so basic and so old, but it still holds true today. And I will say that has evolved into zero click advertising or zero click responses. And so now you can see the evolution of thinking about marketing in terms of how much effort are you asking of your customer or prospect before they've even become a customer in terms of clicks. And now they're being rewarded without even having to click on anything to get a response. Like that's where this industry is headed in terms of solving people's problems. It's almost creepy anticipatory, but
Hmm.
that's kind of what people are looking for. If you have the information, use it.
Yeah. Well, I think you kind of touched on it. Again, we talk about this a lot more in the book. Um, but to kind of try to simplify it a little bit, first, there is a lot of obvious things that companies can do. But I don't want to go down that path right now on like getting data from customers because we just spent all this time talking about, minimum expectations and not pissing them off by sending them three surveys and a call from sales if they're not asking for any kind of help. So there obviously is still though those obvious things where if customers are willing to talk to you, there's no better data you can get. Now, again, when I owned a software company before this business, I would say made some mistakes that we often would develop features that we'd have a handful of screaming people wanting, and we'd find out we'd build it and they did not come. And that was the whole thing that was frustrating about the whole entire thing is that, you asked for it and now we're delivering and you're not willing to, I guess, to leverage it or use it. But back to your point, I think there's just so many things that we can do around that, creating a frictionless, better experience for customers. And I think the simplest thing would be doing is like using a whiteboard model, and then basically putting every step of the typical journey. Again, it's never linear like that, but it's kind of a good first step. And then I think once you take that and step back and look at all the steps you've got, that alone will make you realize, okay, this seems like a lot. Just go with your gut. Again, the way I look at this all is, and sadly or unfortunately, every customer out there or consumer out there has had one bad consumer experience, either from traveling or hotels or car rentals, whatever it might be. And if you can recall how you felt during that, keep that kind of lens on from the empathy point of view when you're looking at this, because it might seem to you that when you're so close to the business, this seems fine, but often it's not. And I think the more you can reduce all of the steps, the better it can be. So, for example, we had a client a couple years ago where they were having a significant drop off during their checkout process for this like online, purchasing a workshop for their consulting business. And it was, I think, I don't know, a 8 or 9 step process to complete the checkout. So, which this is not solving world hunger. It was just paying for a simple workshop. And all the steps they wanted, information they wanted the people to fill out with like some very broad questions of like, what is your 5-year plan? It was just asking too much of people. And so that was obviously a big thing that we helped them understand is that, yes, I see where you'd find value in all this data, but from the customer point of view, they don't even understand why they're even giving it to you. So there has to be a more effective way for you to pull the data out. And so that's really what my advice would be is that I think plus also the whole secret shopping model. Again, like you can easily email and call if your company's big enough, pretending you're a customer and seeing what the experience is like. I'll never forget that story where Jeff Bezos did that at Amazon, where everyone was saying they have no customer service problems. And in front of everyone, he picked up the phone and dialed their customer service line. It took like 6 or 7 minutes even to get through. And he's like,
Ugh.
this is a problem. I think again, like I think we all believe that, our organization is beautiful and in a pretty dress, but if the dress is going on a pig, I think you have some serious problems that you want to address. So that's where I think it would be valuable is like be, introspective and kind of just taking a step back and looking at the entire process from finding you all the way to growing with you from a customer point of view. And I bet you're going to find some significant little things here and there that might seem very small to you, but are a really big headache for the customer.
Yeah, and in the book they did share a story about how one business did this and they had so much work to do with so much quote low-hanging fruit. And to play devil's advocate though on the I guess data capture from a prospect or customer, I think some of that is well-meaning in that if we get this information now, we can help solve those downstream issues, or as the book calls it, next issue resolution. So they are trying to anticipate, in some respects, future issues, or, where are you now and where might you be? And similar to the car thing, like it's just too soon. If they had waited maybe a month to call you, or waited until you actually had to like have an expensive service with the car, then that would be more timely, like thinking about that. But the whole next issue resolution thing is the next layer of being able to handle bare minimum expectations of a customer is now you continue to remove the friction from the experience of being inside your brand. Once you've got them, now you want to keep them. You have to keep that experience easy. And whether that's customer service, so if the sales process is super easy and I can do it all via a chat bot, well, then it really sucks if I have to sit on the phone for an hour to solve any problems once I've become a customer. That kind of stuff doesn't make sense to me. And so it's it's thinking about it as a holistic experience and individual experiences, kind of like the 1 + 1 = 3 situation too.
Hmm.
Is one experience great and then, you know, going through an issue is a pain in the butt.
Yeah, and I think to your point there, I let's just stay on the whole car dealership analogy. Um, you know, after my I guess 2 times ago when that whole headache happened, last time I go, I got, pretty not close, I'm not friends with him, but I've gotten friendly with the main service guy that I always, see and make my appointments with. And they were having, I guess, a challenge finding my key or something. And so I had like, I don't know, a couple of minutes just sitting there waiting with him. And I brought up, because he actually mentioned me, oh, hey, you're going to be getting a survey thing. I guess they get compensated when you give good scores or whatever. That's when I'm like, okay, he brought it up. And so I could not help myself to have a 3 minute quick, non-requested advisory session. And I shared with him, I'm like, there's been numerous times, where me and you have chatted about stuff like, for example, I told you last year how I was going on a road trip with my family and was going to use my car and we were going to be driving, many, many miles. You knew the date when I was going, and that was going to be like 7 or 8 months before my service. Like, why didn't you recommend, booking an appointment now for me to come in, 2 weeks before that session to ensure that my car is ready to go and keep me safe and my family safe? I don't understand. Like, your customers are saying this stuff, and I don't understand why you're not making it easy on people. And why do I have to wait until, the engine light is on, and then I have to figure out how to get a hold of you all and book an appointment. And of course, you guys are never able to do it when I'm available because you're booked out for months. It's a very frustrating process. There has to be a technology nowadays. And being that I've been a customer of yours now for 8 years, and you can see my consistent service pattern within a few weeks, I don't understand why this things can't be more proactive for people. And for example, like why didn't you call me a week or two before that trip and had an alert in your system to follow up with me to check in if I'm ready for an appointment if I didn't already make one with you? Like, I just feel like businesses don't, again, take an extra step and make things easier on people. Instead, they rely on technology to be, scamming, or not scamming, spamming is probably the right word, spamming their customer base. And again, they think they're helping them and they're just making things worse.
Yeah, it's like be careful what you ask for because you can do it once and don't overstay your welcome, I guess, is kind of how I think about getting inundated with those kinds of requests. And especially when it's like, well, especially when you tell me, make sure you give me a 5-star review, then I never want to do it. Even if they,
Ugh.
it's so icky. And the expectation thing, I think it's helpful to get multiple perspectives because here's a question for you. When I picked up my car from service last week, it didn't need anything fancy or special. It was the end of the day. I dropped off the loaner car and my advisor was not there. He'd gone home. It was very close to closing. And so I said, I'm here for the little car out front. They handed me my key and I walked to my car. I got in it and I left. And I thought, how interesting. There was no one around. It was pretty empty, 15 minutes to close. And the young man couldn't walk me to my car and open the door for me. Like
Hmm.
I thought about that after the fact of like, what would I have appreciated that could have ended this on such a lovely note? And something as simple as opening a car door, a type of chivalrous experience that took no effort, maybe 5 seconds. I thought, I don't know why it popped into my head, but for a second I was like, why am I opening my own car door?
But I think to your point, devil's advocate there, though, is there are some people out there that might be offended by that. And so I think, again, I think businesses need to find a way to train their, customer facing people in all various departments in a way to just very simply ask some kind of question or make some kind of offer, and then based upon that customer's response, be a chameleon. Because I think there, if I was that rep, I would be like, "Hey, we're closing soon. Would you like me to, take you, show you your car, or something like that, without being weird?" I think then you had the option now to say yes or no, versus me assuming that you'd be okay with it. Again, I think it's a fine line, and I wish that people that are in the customer service roles had this like mind reader ability. Because again, like someone like me, 'cause I did work often in the service space, like in a restaurant, for example, when I was in college, and I'm a little overly sensitive to people in these kind of roles. And again, we're not mind readers, but it requires a certain skill to figure out how you want to engage with someone, but not overdo it. To your point, it's a really fine line.
I agree. And I think that's why a lot of companies seem to overemphasize the extra delight portion of,
Mhm.
a customer's experience, which is kind of what we're saying here from a revenue perspective. The book is debunking that really is giving you the ROI you think it is. It's really meeting expectations and taking a look at that. And, to your point, yes, decide what works in your business. Maybe give it a try. Like the harm in that of doing something nice and then it not working out is way better than it for me. I feel like they didn't even care or try. It's
Fair.
like, so did you think about it? And if it didn't work, great. Um, but yeah, it is individual, it is unique, and I think that's what can make your business stand out is by figuring that out and spending a little time on it.
Yeah, and that's why I think this is kind of a fun topic to talk about here is that again, it's always I guess it doesn't I guess often surprises me how something that seems so little can make such a significant difference. Again, back to that roofing example, that company lost out on a significant amount of money because they made the experience not one that I appreciated.
Mhm.
And so I think again, there is just so many businesses out there in this world that I'm just like, my goodness, like I'm amazed you even have customers coming here, and they're only coming here because of one thing, maybe like they really enjoy the staff member, or maybe the food is really good, or whatever the situation might be. But the second that one thing they like is goes below their expectations or the minimum ones, they're going to be gone. You're never going to hear from them again. And then worse, they're going to bad talk you, and those are probably the worst customer situations you could have. So I think
Mhm.
again for me, I'm really enjoying this book because from a marketing point of view, I think that's one of the unique skills that often marketers or good marketers have is we're really, really good at think about things from a empathetic, solving pain point, and then delivering upon that brand promise. And that's what I think is so exciting is that, this book helped me kind of rethink that our job as marketers isn't to basically create a choose your own adventure, offer up every option possible. Instead, I think is we need to take a step back here and look at the foundation of your company and how you're engaging with customers today. And if there are friction points you have, that's likely why you're not scaling and having those current customers become ambassadors, raving fans, and recommending you to other family and friends because you're not meeting their needs. So if you can just do a proper, analysis on that whole like friction to flow kind of mindset, I just feel like you're definitely going to cover at least one thing. And again, now I'm not saying overnight that a business has to solve all that because some of this might be requiring, I don't know, whole new software, and it could be 6 to 12 months. But I think every quarter there should be definitely an initiative in place of how do we make this more joyful for our ideal customer to want to, not only hire us but stay with us and grow with us, and they're constantly getting value from it. And this is kind of more of a relationship, a partnership versus transactional nature. And that's really what I was hoping people would get out of listening to this. And what I'm finding value in this book is because it's allowing me to kind of take a step back and look at how we're supporting our clients. And I think we have a huge benefit because, again, in our clients' defense, when you're living day in, day out in the thick of things, it's often really hard to see, where these little opportunities are that, again, might seem little, but it could be big for your customers. So that's really what I think we're trying to encourage here is to really kind of take a look in the mirror and figure out maybe at least one thing you can do to make the experience better for your potential clients.
Yeah. I think you could take the simple question they offer in the book, which is, are we easy to work with? Asking that in your NPS, for example. I mean, you'll get a bunch of gold from that, but do it by department. Are we easy to find? Are we easy to purchase from? Are we easy to work with? Are we easy to pay? And, you could take each department and give them that kind of guidance. And I think you'll get a lot of really good stuff and spend your excellent time and money on fixing those instead of overly delighting. Maybe go back to basics.
Love it.
Yep.
Let's wrap it up then. That's a good one.
Yeah. All right. Well, now that I've dropped the mic here, people, figuratively, not literally, but we hope you all have a great rest of your day. And as always, send us questions. We'd love to hear them. And thanks, Jay. Have a great day.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.